I think we've got enough people to get started. I'm sure there will be a few more that trickle in. I always love to kick these off by, making everyone come off mute and introduce themselves. So I'm giving you fair warning right now. So I'll start. My name is Sara Stock. I am co-founder of Legal Back Office, founder of Stock Legal. I'm here today to talk to you about strategic planning. It's one of the blogs in the blog series, How to Run a Law Firm, the 101 version that I wrote. Strategic planning is my favorite topic to talk about. And so I get really excited about this one. It's my favorite time of the year. I love working with other law firms as they're going through this process. And so I just want to say thank you all for joining today. And I'm really excited to share a little bit of information about strategic planning with you. Lisa, you are first on my bingo card. Would you like to introduce yourself, name, firm, how long you've been in practice? Love to hear a little bit about your office.
Sure, Lisa Newman Law. I've had my own firm since 2021, but I've been practicing law since 1992.
I
And we're
love that.
trying to gear up and figure out how to do what we do better. And so I'm
Yeah,
trying this year to take as many classes as I can to
excellent.
learn about better management skills. And Courtney, who joined, is one of my team members who really runs my back office for me.
Oh, I love that. Fantastic. Yeah, kudos to you, Lisa, for taking that step. Technology is changing so fast right now that we are all struggling to catch up. And so, it now is the time because I feel like if you're not leaning into technology, streamlining your practice, creating efficiencies, you run the risk of being left behind. So, perfect. Really, really great to hear from you, Lisa. Thank you. Stacy, you're next on my bingo card.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. That's a great way. Perfect.
Okay, sweet, sweet, sweet. I am not an attorney, but I'm joining from Banjack and Associates, John Banjack's assistant, and we are looking for how we can improve things and be more efficient this year. We've identified some things, but I just thought this could be a great launching point from someone that John knows and respects, and so I wanted to get on and learn as much as I could as a support.
Daisy, I'm so excited to put a face with a name. Thank you. We've
Yeah,
emailed a
happy to
number
be.
of times. And, in the age of digital, like I still remember, when I started practicing back in the early 2000s, the very first deal that I did where I didn't talk to anybody on the phone until we got to closing. And now, I mean, we do all kinds of business with people without ever seeing their faces. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it's just wild to me that this is where we're at. So yeah, great to see you, Stacy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Courtney, do you want to introduce yourself? You are
Hi.
next.
Yeah, I'm Courtney Ketchersid. Like Lisa said, I am an associate at her office. I've been with Lisa closing it on 2 years now, practicing. I was licensed in 2011. And I am helping to run the office, and this is kind of my first experience doing that. So I'm excited to learn more about how to do that and how to do it better.
Excellent. Really nice to meet you, Courtney. Thanks for joining us. Anita, you are next on my bingo card.
Hi, my name is Anita. I'm actually not a lawyer. I am an office manager and a bookkeeper for Stagmeyer, Gelbart, Schwartz, and Benavente here in Irvine.
Excellent.
And
Yeah.
my managing partner actually forwarded me this, and I decided I would attend
I
and learn
love
more.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having the people who are truly the backbone of the law firm as a part of this, we love when you join us. So yeah, thank you for that, and I appreciate the background, Anita. Denise, you are up next.
Hi, Sarah. Uh, thank you for this seminar. I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, my name is Denise McCracken. I'm a solo practitioner at DB McCracken Law, based out of St. Louis, Missouri. My practice started um, in late 2016. And when Missouri went legal for medical marijuana, I started focusing my practice on cannabis law in 2018. And so my practice is almost 100% cannabis law and is regulatory focused. And thank you so much, Sarah, for letting me be part of this webinar today.
Yeah, so glad to have you, Denise. I'm excited to get to talk to you twice in one day. That is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Carmen Humphreys is our Senior Director of Operations at LBO, and I know she is in and out of meetings right now. Carmen, are you in a place where you can come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I have been at LBO for a whole month now. Um, happy to be here and keep everything running smoothly for everything at LBO.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. All right, well, let's jump in. As I mentioned, strategic planning is hands down my favorite topic to talk about. When September, October start creeping in, I get that feeling of like a kid at Christmas, like, ooh, we get to plan for next year. This is really exciting. It's a time for founders of firms and managing partners to get to dream really big, right? And when you're doing strategic planning right, you're looking at a 5 year plan, and then you're looking at, okay, if this is my 5 year plan, where do I need to be by year three? And if this is my 3 year plan to get to my year three, where do I need to be at the end of this year? And then how do I break that down by quarter, right? And how do I set challenging but achievable goals by quarter to go quarter by quarter and get to the end of the year goals? And all of those goals are pushing towards your 3 year goal and your 5 year goal. It is often challenging for the operational folks because the managing partners and the firm founders are dreaming really big, and the operational folks are like, wait a minute, hello, we are the ones who actually have to get us from point A to point Z. And so there's some really fun tension that's created between the people who are dreaming big and then the people who are actually thinking project management step by step. And so a well run strategic planning process takes the big dreams, breaks them down into operational chunks, and then helps the firm go quarter by quarter to achieve their goals. So today, I'm going to kind of walk you through the 30,000. My goal today is not to teach you how to do strategic planning. I can't do that in what will essentially be 40 minutes or so. But what I can do is paint the big picture of the components of a strategic plan. And hopefully, if nothing else, get you thinking about what you need to be starting to process today. It's, April of 2026, the date that we're giving this webinar. So if you can start thinking today about what are the parts and pieces that by September or October you need to be putting pen to paper on. Denise, I said that earlier, and I'm like, God, I'm showing my age. I just did it again. Where you can be putting pen to paper and start building out your strategic plan for 2027. So we're going to start with the big picture, the 30,000 foot, the vision. And then we're going to jump into a little bit about value propositions and differentiation or competitive advantage. We're going to talk a little bit about financial management, operational excellence, team culture, and then, like, once you write this strategic plan, what do you really do with it, right? Like, how does it become your project management tool to get you from December of the previous year to December of the next year? So before I continue, I'll just pause for a moment and ask, with that agenda, is there anything that you were hoping to get from this hour that we're together that I haven't put up on the board? All right. Well, then good. Then I'll jump in and get started. And I'm really bad at talking at people. I much prefer a conversation than, me talking at a bunch of squares on a on a Zoom board. So if you have any questions while I'm going through this, please don't hesitate, jump in because I would love to make this more of a conversation. Okay. So strategic planning and vision, right? As you're going through this process, one of the things that you probably already know is that lawyers are, dare I say, obsessed with the billable hour. And we could talk for days about whether the billable hour model will survive the AI revolution. That's not our topic today. But when we think about the value of our time as lawyers, we know we have an hourly rate, and it feels like our highest and best use is to be billing time for clients. Yes, that is important. It's how we create revenue. But leaders of firms have really got to shift their focus from billable hours to thinking bigger. Because when you're thinking bigger and creating revenue opportunities for the firm, you're actually creating value that is greater than your hourly rate. And I know sometimes it's hard for lawyers to wrap their heads around. And so while we can't do it every minute of every day, we can do it during a strategic planning session. It allows us to think about the bigger purpose of the firm and where we really want to build and grow. And so in that strategic planning process, one of the first critical steps is to figure out your mission, your vision, and your values. They really shape everything that you do. And when you've got your values really clear, when you understand what your mission is, it allows you to run everything through that lens. And when I say everything, I mean, that includes hiring decisions. So, as you're bringing on a new team member, once you are really clear and living your mission, your vision, and your values, you are running that candidate through the lens of your mission, vision, values. Do they align, right? This all kind of comes back to culture in some way, shape, or form, but it is critical from a firm growth perspective to get really clear on the mission of the firm, the vision of the firm, and the values of the firm, and then ensure that all of the existing team members are in line with that they live it, that they breathe it, and that as you're hiring new people, you're running those new people through the lens of your mission, your vision, and your values. It can protect you from the agony of a bad hire that is culturally disruptive. And I personally have seen so many firms fall apart because they've let their culture slide or they've let their culture shift. So, incredibly critical. It's squishy, right? And so at Legal Back Office, when we're talking to law firms about the importance of mission, vision, values, sometimes we get the like, really? Yes, really. It is incredibly important. And I take it a step further and say, once you're really clear on your mission, vision, values, you then start making decisions about who your clients are, who you accept as a client by looking at your mission, vision, values. Are they well aligned with what you're trying to do? How you're trying to grow. Your mission, vision, values should be interwoven into your marketing. If you're doing social media marketing, the theme of your mission, vision, values should be running through your social media marketing as well. Like it really does become this guidepost for all of the big decisions that you're making at the firm. And yeah, we like to say your vibe attracts your top tribe, right? And what that means is, who you are, you sit down in a room, you decide, these are the things that we stand for as a firm. And then you put it out into the world, right? You put it out in the world through your website, through your social media marketing, just by who you are in the world. And by putting that out there, it starts to attract into your orbit the potential lawyers that you might hire, the potential staff that you might hire, the clients that seek you out, right? And so that's why we say, somewhat tongue in cheek, your vibe attracts your tribe. So, what does that all really mean? Well, I like to share at this point our core values at Legal Back Office. And, this is something that we reevaluate every single year. And we sit down and we say, who are we today? Do our current core values adequately describe who we are today? And maybe better yet, do our current core values adequately describe who we aspire to be as we grow, as we scale? And so I hate to read a slide, but you guys, I think it's worth reading through these, just so that you get a sense of how we landed in this position, and how we use our core values. So our first is accountable partnership. What that means is that we do what we say we will do, and we ensure that our words match our actions so that we can foster transparent, trusting relationships. Well, explaining this one, what I can say is that Legal Back Office asks its clients to trust us with some of their most sensitive information, their financial data. They entrust us with invoicing their clients. They entrust us in building out their marketing message and putting it out into the world. They entrust us with their IT, their devices, with their computers, with their help desk requests. I could go on, but as a back office service provider, our clients put tremendous trust in us, and we are responsible for the daily operations of their firm. And because of that, we have the value of accountable partnership, which is essentially integrity of word and action. And what that means to the team is that when we say something to a client, we do it. When we tell them that we're going to have them something by a certain day or a certain time, we deliver. And if on the off chance something comes up, we communicate, right? So that there is always constant communication around accountability. And so that's why it's number one. It's an incredibly important piece to who we are at Legal Back Office. Growth mindset, right? Everybody talks about growth mindset, but really, like, growth mindset is incredibly important, especially as we were talking initially about the dynamic, ever changing world that we're in right now. You've got to bring a growth mindset. And, Legal Back Office is always looking for ways to better serve our clients, better technology to use, trying to stay up on AI and how law firms are using AI. That's incredibly important. Um, Empathetic curiosity might be my favorite value. It was a really fun one for us to land on. And that empathetic curiosity is, we really try to put ourselves in the seat of our clients. We bring a lot of curiosity to the table to try to help our clients understand, or help us understand our clients' needs. But we do it in a way where, like, it is as if we are on your team, right? And so the empathetic curiosity was a really fun one for me. Collaborative excellence, that has a lot to do with clear communication, and then analytical innovation. Everybody talks about innovation. Oh, we have to be innovative. We do, but we have to be innovative in a way that allows us to really, like, use data to develop creative solutions instead of just being fun and creative. And so I go into all of that detail because if you and your firm are going through a strategic planning process, or, maybe it's just, you in September, October, November of this year, sitting down to try to build out a strategic plan, hopefully the framework that I just walked you through and the way that we think about the values at Legal Back Office you can take that and apply it to who you are as a firm and how to really build out your core values. And again, I don't mean to belabor the point, but I think it's worth saying one more time that these core values show up in the way that we engage with our clients. They show up in the way that we engage with each other as a team at Legal Back Office. They show up in the lens through which we hire. They show up in the way that we try to interweave our core values into our social media marketing. And that in turn, again, your vibe attracts your tribe. That in turn has led us to engage with some of the most amazing law firms throughout the United States. And I can trace it all back to what are our core values, how do they show up in what we put out into the world. So incredibly important, squishy, I know, but an incredibly important exercise to go through. Okay. The next is, looking at through your strategic planning process, what is your value proposition and what is your competitive advantage? So it's tough, right? Building a small law firm is an incredibly hard process. And, when you start out, sometimes you feel a little bit like the services that I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I felt a little bit like the services that I was providing were a bit of a commodity. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've said, well, gosh, an employment agreement that you get from Stock Legal is very similar to an employment agreement that you would get from Polzanelli, Hush, like name big law firm, right? We all have the same information. We're all strong drafters. We all put together really impressive, comprehensive agreements. But what really makes us different? Why would clients come to Stock Legal instead of going to name other big law firm, right? Well, that's your value proposition. That's your competitive advantage. And so if you're going through a strategic planning process, some of the questions that you can ask yourself are, what does your firm do better than others? How is it that you're different? And I'll use Stock Legal as an example. Stock Legal only works with small to mid-sized law firms. I'm sorry, small to mid-sized businesses. I'm talking to lawyers. So Stock Legal only works with small to mid-sized businesses, right? And so our value proposition is that our firm was built only for small to mid-sized businesses. Other bigger law firms are built for, much larger business clients. And so, we really focus in on, we are a boutique law firm with an incredibly niche skill set. We know small to mid-sized business legal issues better than anyone else. And all of this kind of plays into why clients would choose you over someone else, right? Sometimes it's price, right? As a small law firm, you get to say our rates are lower than X, Y, or Z firm, right? We may not be the cheapest in the market, but we're half of what you would pay at name other big law firm, right? So that's always for a small to mid-sized law firm, a good reason why my clients might choose you, but it shouldn't be the only reason. You have a specific expertise, and that specific expertise is your value proposition. It's your competitive advantage. It's what makes you different. And, this process, this analysis is really central to strategic planning. And it, again, is interwoven into all of your messaging. It should appear on your website multiple times. It should be highlighted on your website. It should appear in your social media marketing. It should be on your personal LinkedIn. It should be on your firm's LinkedIn. Because when people these days, it's crazy to me how potential clients find law firms. Um, the number of referrals from ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude that we get these days, it just blows my mind. And how all of those AI platforms find legal back office is because we're really clear about who we are, what we do, what our value proposition is, and what our competitive advantage is. We're clear on our website, we're clear on our social media marketing, et cetera. So it's how clients find you. Denise and I were actually talking earlier about how, oftentimes clients are referred to lawyers by their buddy who's a CPA or a banker or a financial advisor, or maybe plays golf with them. And, if that referral is to a big firm, well, the potential client might go to the big firm, talk to somebody, sticker shock, right? Because their rates are, as we know, very high. And go home and then that night go in and start Googling or go into chat and start asking chat, who else is out there, right? Well, this is how that person finds you, by getting really clear on your value proposition, on your competitive advantage, and interweaving that into your website, your LinkedIn, your social media marketing. Okay, so let's move on. So I mentioned when we started that strategic planning has this really fun tension. And the really fun tension is between the managing partner, the firm founder who's dreaming really big, and then the operational execution, right? And so, as a very process driven lawyer, despite the fact that I love to dream big, I love the operational execution piece of a well written strategic plan. And so, your strategic plan might start with an executive summary, mission, vision, values, competitive advantage, all of the parts and pieces that we've talked about, and then we'll get to a few more that are critically important as well. But I like having multiple pages of operational goals. And those operational goals by quarter help you figure out from a project management perspective how you get to that 1 year goal, right? And that 1 year goal might be, in my example, it's like $4 million in revenue, right? Okay, great. We've set this $4 million in revenue goal. What are the steps that we need to take to get there? And then how do we create some accountability? And the accountability is not just like, are we measuring up to the strategic plan? The accountability is, okay, who's actually doing these things, right? So who owns this specific operational initiative? And by when will we have it done? And that level of accountability really helps to build trust, because, if I know that by the end of Q2, Carmen, since she's on this Zoom with us, has this operational goal, she owns it, and then she completes it by the end of the quarter. I mean, that really helps to create trust between the two of us. So what does this really look like in practice, right? So I put an example up here of what an operational goals section could potentially look like. And I'll walk you through just a little bit of it, right? And by the way, this is just a quick snapshot. I didn't want to go on and on and on in multiple slides about this, but your operational goals could have an entire section on technology improvements. They could have an entire section on transitioning from one benefits provider to another benefits provider. Maybe you're graduating to a PEO, right? And you could have operational goals to graduate to a PEO. You might have a whole slew of summer interns coming in, and you might have operational goals that are assigned to your summer interns. You're going to have 3 or 4 law students in for 2.5 months, and they're eager and they're technologically savvy and all of these things. And so you might have operational goals that they're responsible for. So I'm just giving you a quick snapshot here. This is by no means a comprehensive example. So, start with a big picture goal, right? Revenue is an easy one because, revenue, well, I mean, I say this like sometimes it blows my mind how much lawyers struggle to understand the business of law. So worth saying that, when you set a revenue goal, right? The way that you can very easily back into a revenue goal is that you have a certain number of attorneys, they have a certain hourly commitment, they have a certain rate. And if you take each attorney's hourly commitment times rate, it should give you a total amount of revenue that each attorney you could expect at 100% committed hours that attorney would produce. And when you sum that column, that could be your total revenue for the year. 100% is hard, right? Firms do this from a revenue perspective, and the economy does this. And so, when we do strategic planning, we look at it as there should be a number for 100% of committed hours and then 80% of your committed hours, so that your more conservative revenue goal is that all of your attorneys are hitting, on average, 80% of their committed hours. And that should give you what your revenue goal is for the year. And there are a lot, I'll talk just briefly when we get to the financial section on how to build out key performance indicators or KPIs. But let's just say for now that, you can take that $4 million, you can break it up quarterly, you can break it up by department. So if you have multiple service lines in your law firm, you can look at how each of the service lines is performing. And then I use the example of, okay, another goal could be to create an expansion plan that builds the firm through geographic considerations, organic growth, and possible M&A activities with other lawyers and firms, right? So you're looking at growing your law firm, not just through your typical organic growth, people referring clients to you, but maybe you're interested in expanding into other markets, and buying or merging with other firms. So I just pulled two of them. So let's say you're looking at organic growth, right? Well, when you think about organic growth, obviously that is new clients that are referred to you. But what we lawyers forget about a lot is that we have this huge client base, right, of existing clients who in the past, they know us, they trust us, in the past they've used us. And when I say remarketing to existing clients, I mean, like, maybe it's an email campaign, right? Constant Contacts has a very affordable subscription, and you can upload an email list into Constant Contacts, and you can send out an email to all of your clients that way. There are thousands of other platforms out there. Constant Contacts doesn't pay me to say that, but there are thousands of other platforms out there, all that do the same thing, right? And that remarketing campaign could just be, an update. Jane Smith joined the firm, and here's Jane's background. She's been practicing for 15 years. She's got incredible experience. And, if you'd like to work with Jane, don't hesitate. Just reach out to us. We'd love to set up a complimentary Zoom with Jane, right? It could be something that's that simple. And when you're looking here at the scorecard that I built out, if you're doing this remarketing plan, you can put a date on it. Maybe it is by June 15th of 2026, you're going to send this email campaign out to all of your existing clients. And as you're working through that operational goal, maybe you're adding some notes. On May 15th, I uploaded all client emails into Constant Contacts. On May 25th, I reached out to the lawyers to review the verbiage that I've written or that ChatGPT wrote for the email that's going to go out to our previous clients. And accountability is who owns this, right? Who at the firm owns this? Is it your office manager? Is it your assistant? Is it the managing partner? Not a good use of his or her time, but it could be, right? And so that's where this really becomes an effective tool because we've got a deadline, right? We're all deadline driven. We've got notes in here so that, if you have a leadership team at the firm, anybody who picks up the strategic plan knows where this operational goal is at any point in time. And they know that the director of operations is accountable for it. And so if they're curious how it's going, they can pick up the phone and call the director of operations. I won't go through all the parts and pieces of this because, I think I could probably talk all day about operational goals and how they really move the firm forward. I think you get my drift here. You get a sense of what it is that, or how it is that you could really use this tool. So I'll keep us moving. Financial management, this is another critical piece of building out a strategic plan. And often I talk to firms about creating a budget, even if they're not doing a strategic planning process in September, October, November of each year. Um, you know, a lot of lawyers are scared of numbers, or maybe not scared, but it's just not their comfort zone, right? I've heard lawyers say many times, I deal in words, not numbers. So I get, understand, and appreciate how intimidating, overwhelming, your financial tools can be. I'm here to tell you they are also critical to your success. And sometimes just really leaning into that discomfort is all it takes to start familiarizing yourself with the power of the information that they can provide. Um, a little bit of coffee. Um, so, when I talk about a budget, I will say that it really isn't as difficult as you might think to build out a budget for your practice. We talked a little bit about how to calculate your potential revenue for the upcoming year, and how to project out expenses can really sometimes be as simple as pulling the data out of QuickBooks Online, or if you're using Zero or whatever bookkeeping software you're using, pulling your expenses out and using those as a basis to project for the upcoming year. Those parts and pieces, as you're pulling them out and you're starting to evaluate your expenses for the upcoming year, trigger all kinds of great action items. Like, oh, wow, I didn't realize my malpractice insurance had become so expensive. Maybe I should rebid that this year. Or, wow, when did our practice management software become so pricey per user? Is it worth looking into other practice management softwares? Or, gosh, are we really getting everything we need out of our document management system? Is it time to upgrade? What would that look like? How would that impact the firm's overall net profit, right? So that exercise in and of itself can lead to dramatic financial improvements at the firm. And then if you want to get really excited about it, once you build out that budget for the upcoming year, your bookkeeper can take your profit and loss statement that they should be producing for you every month and do what's called a budget to actual. So you have projected out in 2027 what your expenses will be, what your projected revenue is, ideally by month. And as your profit and loss statement is created, your bookkeeper can compare for you, well, we budgeted X, but we're at Y. And in looking at the comparison of those two sets of numbers, again, it triggers all of these really important conversations. well, why aren't we at the revenue numbers that we expected to be at? Well, estate planning's not hitting their hourly goals. Well, wait, why are they not hitting their hourly goals? What does originations look like in estate planning? Why are our expenses so, why is the American Express bill so high? Are we not charging all of the appropriate expenses to our clients? And an audit can be triggered from that. Let's go through an audit. We're recording fees are supposed to be charged to clients. Are we catching all of them? Are they getting charged to clients? Those little nuances, if you will. Well, Carmen says all the time, pennies make dollars, right? Those little nuances really start to add up. And so that's where I think budgeting becomes even more powerful than just a tool to give you, a pretend picture of what next year could look like. That pretend picture, if you will, is something that if as you're doing this budgeting exercise year over year, you get better and better and better at. And it really does allow you to know, for example, like we've allotted, $25,000 to sponsorships in 2027. And because our budget only allows for $25,000 of sponsorships in 2027, where do our dollars go the furthest with sponsorship? And let's critically evaluate all of our sponsorship opportunities through that lens because we know we only have $25,000 allotted to it. The next piece I want to just touch on briefly is key performance indicators. These are our KPIs. They are our goals, financial goals that we've set. And it could be something as simple as, gosh, I've been doing this long enough that I know that if every month I have 15 lunches, of those 15 lunches, I usually get a client or two, right? It could be something as simple as that. At Stock Legal, one of the things that we look at is that we've learned to hit our financial projected numbers and our budget. We need to be signing between 30 and 50 new engagement letters every month. And part of that is we now know what the lifetime value of each of our clients is, each of our segments of clients, if you will. So we know 30 to 50 new engagement letters every month, right? Your key performance indicators are not generic. It's not something I can just tell you, here are your 6 KPIs. It really is dependent upon the kind of firm that you're running, and the way that your lawyers are creating revenue. So, as part of a strategic planning process, identifying those KPIs is really important. Of course, your monthly reports will help you check progress against your budget. We talked a little bit about budget to actual already, your P&L, and then of course your balance sheet. Things that we can look at, revenue by practice area. I always like to toss that in because one of the things that I find really powerful is that when you have a firm that has multiple service lines, you can create classes inside QuickBooks. And those classes will essentially allow you to create many profit and loss statements by service line. And that can be really powerful to decide, hey, we're going to bring on litigation. And, this is the first time we've ever done litigation. How do we figure out if litigation is profitable for the firm, right? So looking at revenue by practice area, creating those classes inside QuickBooks, I think can be really powerful. All of this financial management, strategic planning really helps you to understand how you can compensate your lawyers and what incentives you need to build out to grow the firm. you know, Compensation is often driven by what's market. But really, at the end of the day, your ability to compensate your lawyers is dependent upon their hourly rate, the revenue that they can generate, and the percentage of expenses of that total revenue, right? And so whether it's 30% of the revenue they generate or 20% of the revenue that they generate, this exercise helps you really figure that out. So instead of being driven by what's market to compensate your lawyers, you really understand what is the firm capable of doing for their lawyers. And of course, this process helps you keep an eye on expenses as the firm grows because, most firms the size that LBO works with are not big enough to have their own chief financial officer, right? Oftentimes, firms will use legal back office as almost a fractional CFO, and that will walk through their financial package with them every month. So, really digging in and running a process like this helps you as the firm's managing partner, office manager, operations person, or just key attorney who's helping to manage the firm, helps you keep an eye on those expenses because without an eye on them, they just get out of control so quickly. And so I've seen it happen 100 times. Even though it's hard for lawyers, numbers are sometimes hard for lawyers, it is incredibly important. Okay, let's keep going. I could go on and on here, but we're getting a little bit towards the end here, but I can't go through talking about strategic planning without talking about what it means for your team and for your culture. And we talk about here, like live your mission, vision, values. Some of you might have heard of EOS, Entrepreneurs Operating System. EOS is a framework, if you will, that a lot of small to mid-sized businesses use. It can be implemented in law firms as well. But one of my favorite parts of EOS is the values speech. So as you're building out EOS, they ask you, the implementer asks you to write a speech to give to your entire team on your mission, vision, values. And it just really highlights how important translating your values is to the team. It's a cornerstone of EOS. So, and again, like we're saying to the world, this is who we are, this is what we're about. If you want to be a part of what we're doing here, these are our values. And it helps you make sure that you have the right people, the right leadership people, the right lawyers in the right seats on the right committees, leading the right initiatives. And as we talked about, it's incredibly important in hiring, training, and mentoring. Okay, another sip of coffee here. By the way, can you guys see this? This is my legal back office coffee cup. um, I want to talk just a little bit about continuous improvement because again, strategic planning is not a process by which you write out a plan in Q3 or Q4 of each year, and then you stick it in a drawer and you never look at it again. Um, you know, eh, I am a big believer, not just because it's part of what we do at LBO, but fundamentally having an external facilitator walk you through a strategic planning process is incredibly important. They know you, but they aren't a part of you, right? They can see the forest through the trees. So a facilitated strategic planning process really helps you identify number one, the things that you're not thinking of because you don't know but what you don't know. But really number two, the blind spots, right? Like there may be something that's keeping your firm from growing or even just achieving the results that you'd like to see. And you can't see it because you're in it every single day, right? And then, we talk about revisiting the strategic planning regularly. And this doesn't have to be with a facilitator or a consultant, it can be. But it could just be that, if you're having monthly partner meetings, and if you're not having monthly partner meetings, I highly recommend that you have monthly partner meetings once a quarter, have a part of that monthly partner meeting be to walk through your strategic plan, to look at your operational goals, to see where the progress is being made, to see what goals you've achieved and what goals, maybe are pushing into the next quarter, and then understand why they're pushing into the next quarter. So you don't want to just simply write the plan, stick it in a drawer, wait a year, pull it back out, and be like, well, how did we do? Right. You've got to have those regular check ins. And then identify and celebrate the wins, right? Business is hard. They call it the entrepreneurial roller coaster for a reason. And, the highs are incredibly high, but the lows are incredibly low. And so when you get to a place where one of your operational goals has been achieved or you've hit your quarterly KPIs, celebrate them, right? Maybe it's as simple as, bringing in, brownies to the partner meeting. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. It could be something as simple as seeing the person who was accountable for an operational goal in the hallway and high-fiving him or her. Assuming we're all still in the office in a couple of years, high-fiving him or her and saying, "Good job, we did it," right? Acknowledge and celebrate those wins. It's incredibly important. And 8 minutes left, you guys. 8 minutes to ask all of the questions that you might possibly have. I know I felt like I had to go a little quickly through some key sections, but I did want to try to leave some time here for questions. So, anybody, anybody want to share a question or a thought that they had as we walk through this? How about this?
Oh,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead, Anita. Or I'm sorry, Courtney. That was Courtney.
just had a quick one about the operational goals and the
Yeah.
pages and pages that you recommend. What is your strategy for sharing that with the full team? Is that something that should then get summarized, or, is it everybody all in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to give you the typical lawyer answer and say
It
it
depends.
depends.
I
I mean,
gotcha.
we all could have said it at the same time, right? So, and here's why, right? When you're making a big shift at a firm, it is incredibly important to have the buy-in of the team, right? It could be something like you're changing practice management software, right? That's not something that you want to ambush the team with. Hey, guess what? Next week we're moving from Clio to Practice Panther, right?
Right.
Everybody's losing their minds, right? Lisa's shaking her head. Oh. So, getting the buy-in from the team early on, maybe, if you're in Slack, it's a doodle poll, or maybe if you're having, bi-weekly or weekly meetings with the team, it's, floating the idea, we're thinking about changing practice management software. We'd like to set an operational goal of doing that by the end of Q1. We're really interested in your input on what makes sense for your practice area. Those types of things, getting the team's buy-in, that's incredibly important. Some of the more sensitive ones, like, we're gonna, shoot for the moon when it comes to a revenue goal. We're gonna secretly try to hire this lawyer who we think is gonna bring this huge book of business. Some of those more sensitive goals, you might want to keep amongst the leadership team until the time is right to share with the entire firm. And so that's why I say it depends. But I will say this, at Stock Legal, we take a version of our final strategic plan in Q4, usually in December, and we have a lunch. We bring in lunch for the whole team. And we say, anybody who would like to walk through the strategic plan with us, we would love, love, love your input. And then we do this really painful thing where for an hour, I read them our strategic plan.
I like that though. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, Lisa.
So we're thinking about going to flat fees instead of
Yeah,
hourly billing.
yeah.
Do you have any ideas about how firms quantify what attorneys have done to pay people the right amount when we're going to a flat fee billing?
Yeah, I mean, I can share a little bit about our strategy at Stock Legal. So we do a lot of fixed fee work, including fixed fee M&A, primarily right now buy side sub $15 million transactions. And to get to a point where we could come up with what the right fixed fee is, we took all of our experience and poured it into a spreadsheet of weighted variables. And we went, here are the, I think it's like 17 most common deal structures, right? And with those 17 deal structures, what are all of the legal tools that are a part of those deal structures? And based on our experience, how long does it take us to draft them, walk through them with the client, and at least a gut on how long it takes us to negotiate them, right? And then I say weighted variables because we also plug in things like, M&A is really dependent on the price for an M&A transaction is really dependent upon opposing counsel, right? The number of deals where I've been buy side and seller's attorney is their divorce lawyer or their estate planner is, I mean, it makes the deal exponentially longer. We spend so much time educating, right? And so, it has been a labor of love to try to build out a spreadsheet of possible deal structures, legal tools, and weighted variables to try to get there. But I think it's really smart to be thinking about fixed fees right now. In the age of AI, I just wonder if the hourly model will survive.
So, I think we are going to go to fixed fees, but my question is, if I pay my attorneys based on their collections, but we do a fixed fee
Mm.
that's $5,000, how do I know how much to pay my attorney for that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of firms will take their fixed fees and divide the fixed fee by the hourly rate of the lawyer and then convert them into billable hours as a way to track. That's been something that we've seen work in a number of different situations. Until law firms move to a more typical business salaried model, there's there almost has to be a way to take fixed fees and tie them back to the billable hour.
Yeah, but that's so unfair for like Courtney, who takes 5 hours to draft something versus another attorney who takes 20 hours to draft something.
Agreed. It is. It is. I don't know a good way or haven't come
Okay.
across a good way yet to do that, but you're asking the right questions. You really are.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. Well, look at us lawyers. And I know we've got a non-lawyer on as well. 4:59. It's like we do time for a living or something, right? As you process through what I've shared, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love getting emails after these webinars. I love ideating with people as they're trying to think through some of their challenges. I'm always happy to respond. And, I just want to say thank you for taking an hour out of your busy day to join us. If there's ever anything that we can do for you at Legal Back Office, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sarah.
Okay. Bye.